So if we can investigate and look, basically ask the body questions from the inside out. Oh, how's this gut doing? How are those, the gut lining? We have those microvilli that are like a shag carpet. Well, are they really shaggy, or are they more like chewed down? We might ask questions about, is there, an autoimmunity perceived? Is the brain on fire in some place? Is this area or that area or that area or that area of the brain? So you can get as detailed as you want.
Welcome to the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast, where we believe that raising healthy kids shouldn't be complicated. Our mission is to inspire 20 million families worldwide to take the steps to raise the healthiest generation in our history. We'll interview some of the world's leading experts in nutrition, human potential, and children's health, as well as extraordinary chefs and foodies to gain insight into simple, fun, and creative ways to introduce natural health into homes across this planet. Hey, looking forward to this episode of the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast. Today, our guest is Luminara Serdar, BS, MBA, CPN, NMT. She's a nutritionist and holistic healer who helps kids recover from autism recover from autism using many strategies, including NeuroModulation Technique. She spent nearly 20 years in the biotech industry as a molecular biologist, product manager, and consultant, and was involved in the Human Genome Sequencing project. Her allergies were eliminated in 2 sessions using NeuroModulation Technique. She was so impressed that she learned the technique and now uses it, along with nutrition, detoxification, and her intimate knowledge of body biochemistry to help heal children on the autism spectrum. She's been eliminating allergies and correcting mind-body dysfunction since 2006. She works with clients throughout the world, helping kids and adults restore their inner world so they can more effectively interact with their outer world. And today, our conversation we go deep into what neuromodulation technique is, how it works, and how it might be something that benefits you. Also, we talk about her story, how she got to where she is today, and some different actionable tips you can take to help your family and your kids function better. Enjoy. All right. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast. And today we have a special guest, Luminara Serdar. And I thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate your time today. And I would love to just start by having you tell us a little bit about you, kind of your story of how you got to be doing what you're doing now. And then, of course, tell us what you're up to these days.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. So what I'm doing is I've really focused on helping kids on the autism spectrum to recover. A lot of people maybe don't believe in recovery, but if we look at various things happening in the inside of the body and shift those, then those behaviors that are known as autism can really shift and become more what we want them to be. So I got started in this because actually it's a little bit of a long story. I had my own allergies, right? I moved to Oregon. I'm in this river valley where pollen just, blows through the valley. And I was sitting in the park with my son and sneezing miserably and itchy eyes and watery eyes. And one of the dads at the park said, well, why don't you go take him to see this guy who does NMT, which is neuromodulation technique. He got rid of my son's peanut allergy. And so I went, and 2 sessions later, my allergies were 90% gone. My vision had spontaneously improved. I kept working with this chiropractor who knew this technique, and we got my vision, my contact lens prescription to decrease by 33%. Never happened before. I always went to the eye doctor and they got worse. And so I fell in love with the technique, the neuromodulation. My classical training or training in school was in genetics, cell biology, molecular biology. And so I love the biochemistry of the body. And this just spoke to like how things work in the body and how communication happens within the brain and to the brain and body parts and from the body to the brain. So are you hearing me okay? Okay, just checking.
Yeah, I hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, just checking. So I really wanted to learn this technique, and I studied and I went and learned it. And I, hung out my shingle to work with people with allergies. And because of a particular listing I was on, started getting a lot of parents who had kids with autism, but the allergy part as well, because allergies often go hand in hand with autism and kids on the spectrum. So I would work on their allergies, and then different other things would improve, not just the allergies. But I remember one boy in particular, maybe he was 7 or 8, that he would go to the chiropractor twice a week, but his chiropractic adjustments were holding more, when he went back in. And that was kind of a weird, unexpected, event. And I wanted to understand autism more. So I started going to autism conferences, like you just mentioned, you're going to Autism One. I went to Autism One and several others. And what I started learning was what was actually going on inside the body to create the symptoms of autism. So what we find is, and this is anyone on the spectrum, this is right, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, allergies, asthma. This is kind of the spectrum. It's wider than just autism. And what I learned was that, our gut flora was kind of messed up. The guts are messed up. A lot of kids have constipation. They can't sleep. They're very irritated inside the body. There's a lot of autoimmunity and a lot of inflammation, particularly in the brain. And when you've got inflammation in the brain, your neurons aren't connecting, right? You're not talking to each other, and you're not talking to the body, and you're not talking to the immune system. So these are kind of all in-depth body things that I learned about, and combining that with my knowledge of biochemistry and molecular biology. Over time, I just kind of developed this whole system to go along with the neuromodulation. I call it I'm kind of like a detective, right? I do these different assessments so that in the body I can say, okay, what's the level of toxicities, or how much is this mercury, for example, a burden for the body? What kind of chronic infections do we have in there? Where's the inflammation? And then based on that, I can use the neuromodulation to make adjustments. Is that coming through clear? Any questions about that so far?
Well, I have a couple questions, but from what you shared that I'd love to explore a little bit. So one is something you mentioned kind of at the beginning of that story about, I don't remember what word you used. So forgive me if you didn't say cure or resolve, but resolving autism or curing autism or correcting it or whatnot, because that's definitely, as I'm sure you're aware too, a big sort of issue of whether that's possible or whether that's something to be going for. And I know there's several different people and organizations out there now basically trying to spread the word that this is a possibility, that having a child usually with autism diagnosis isn't like a life sentence, and that there are things you can do. So I don't know if I had a question about that. I think I just wanted to point at that. And if we had anything to add to that piece or not.
Yeah, I use the word recovery.
Yeah,
and
that's a better word. That's good.
I have this client who's now 18. I mean, he's not a client currently because he's recovered from his diagnosis of autism by his doctor, who was very reluctant to give it, didn't believe it could happen. And he made a video recently called The Autism Factory. I shared it on social media, but it's not on my website yet. And, one of the things he said at the end was, I'm recovered, meaning my body works better, but I'll still always have autism, meaning his brain still works differently than other people. He did some assessments where it pointed out how his brain put concepts together or something like that. So it was different than what we would call neurotypical. So I think that maybe the brain function, I don't even want to call it autism or neurotypical or not typical, but the way our brains work will probably always be the same. But all the underlying distress in the body can be recovered from. I think that's the distinction I want to make. Yeah,
that's a good distinction. I think and I think that is a great way to sort of, because there's another sort of divide that I run into a lot, that sometimes I feel frustrated by, honestly. But there's a divide between the idea that ADHD or autism or these ways that the brain, like you were saying, maybe puts things together differently and that type of thing, is we should just see it as like a blessing, like that's just their own uniqueness. And then other people get very offended by that concept, like, how would you like to have to live with, this challenge, these challenges? And I think that's a cool way to sort of bridge that there's work to be done to really help a person function at their optimum, but what their optimum looks like may still be, not what we call neurotypical or that type of thing. And that can be, seen as their own brilliance or gift, or however it can be also be a challenge and a struggle, certainly throughout their lives too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's something we need to remember. Well, gosh, where do I start with this? This is kind of the big picture, okay? We live in a very, very toxic environment. 100, 200 years ago, we didn't have the level of chemicals in our soil or in our food or in the air or in the water or in the oceans. And we weren't producing constantly these chemicals. And our bodies have evolved over thousands and thousands of years. But in the last couple hundred, we haven't evolved to very well enough to handle these kinds of toxins. On top of that, we've got these EMFs we're putting into the air. Again, 100, 150 years ago, we didn't have electric wires overhead. We didn't have we're so used to our, 4G technology, our cell phones, but there's a particular frequency emitted by the cell phone towers and by the devices in our hands. And that 2.4 gigahertz has been shown to be the most disruptive frequency for the human body, for the cells. And now we're going to 5G, which is basically 4.8 gigahertz. So it's double whammying on top of that 2.4. So this is an unprecedented experiment on humans and the rest of the environment. So I just want to say that I think because of those kinds of things, we're not sure how the human body is going to respond. Well, I guess we're seeing it with chronic illness. But the other thing on top of that is what people feel, what we call food in our society is industrialized chemicals put together that looks like food for the most part. Everything in the center aisles of the grocery store, it's all processed, right? So I just want to point out that what we're also putting in, on, and breathing through our bodies is also having an effect. And that's what we're seeing.
Absolutely. Unfortunately so, that the overwhelming, increase in all of these diseases, especially with our kids. And, that's obviously what has spurred a lot of us on, who obviously speaking for you, because you didn't tell me this, but I'm assuming that's part of your, how you ended up in your work, with other kids. And I know you have an online presence. I've seen, I was mentioning in our pre-chat that I found you because somehow I ended up on your email list. I'm sure it was on purpose, that I saw some resource or something you were offering and got on your list. And I've seen you've been doing online summits and so forth to really help, families that are struggling and suffering. So I appreciate that. And, it's going to take all of us to really make a shift and a change in all of that. I'd love to dive a little more into neuromodulation technique also, because I'd love for you to kind of just give us what is it? Like, what do you do? And how is it that because obviously you dove into that arena because of the profound effect you were having, as someone receiving it. And now you've seen these results, as a practitioner. So what is it? How do you do it? And why does it give you such great results?
Yeah, good questions. So the neuromodulation is what it, if we break it down, neuro, meaning nervous system. So we're really talking about the brain and all the nerves throughout the body. And modulation, well, that means to change or adjust. So the whole methodology is about adjusting the nervous system that basically controls the whole body. So kind of tapping into the central computer, so to speak. But it's a lot more than just the nervous system, because that communicates with the immune system and with the lymph and with all the body cells. So we're really working on the whole body at once. So the idea with neuromodulation, and this I want to give credit to Dr. Leslie Feinberg. He's a chiropractor in Oregon who developed this modality in 2002 and started teaching it. And what he found as a chiropractor, and you can probably relate to this, is I'll just get really simple for a minute. Our brain does a lot of things, but two of the things the brain does is it takes information from the body. So if I touch my hand here, there's a signal that's sent to the brain to feel that, right? Oh, that's pressure, or that's, scratching, or that's pain, or whatever, different sensors. So there's that system that takes information to the brain. And then there's a system then the brain will actually send information. Let's say you touch a hot stove, that signal gets transmitted to the brain, and then the brain goes, oh my God, take your hand off of that. And you have that reaction. So that's the motor part. So we started very simply with saying, well, why is this pain here? And what if it's an incorrect signal to the brain? And so by looking in detail about what those signals were, or what the sensory end organs were, was it pain? Maybe a pain receptor, maybe it was being interpreted in the brain as pain, but it was really a light touch sensor. So you can imagine the difference, what pain feels like versus what light touch feels like. So if you correct that misinformation, or any of the neurons that handle that on the way or in the processing, and you actually give it the right information, you have a whole different story, right? It's a lot like when you're a kid, and I don't know if kids play this anymore, you sit in a circle and you whisper a sentence to one kid and it goes all around the circle, and by the Chinese whispers or telephone, it's called different things. By the time it gets back to the first person, it's this garbled message that, people have misinterpreted it. So I kind of see that as the neurons doing that up to the brain and all around the brain. So that was the basis of neuromodulation. What if we changed what the message was coming in as to what it really is? And I've worked with people with pain. I remember working with this one woman with like 30 years chronic pain in her neck. She had really big neck problems because she had an auto accident. And after one 40-minute session, and this was at a distance, she had no pain. And then when I talked to her a month later, she had pain again, but it was in different areas in different ways. So I kind of see that as a layering, right? That layer of pain came off. So now the next one's like, I'm here too. And there's a lot of emotional stuff that's involved in those kind of events, like an accident or any other kind of trauma. So that's a key piece too. Okay, so what we're dealing with is signaling in the brain, from the brain to the body, from the body to the brain, and then from the brain to the nervous system, from the gut to the brain, all over basically. So if we can investigate and look, basically ask the body questions from the inside out. Oh, how's this gut doing? How are those, the gut lining, we have those microvilli that are like a shag carpet. Well, are they really shaggy, or are they more like chewed down? We might ask questions about, is there, an autoimmunity perceived? Is the brain on fire in some place? Is this area or that area or that area or that area of the brain? So you can get as detailed as you want. And that's kind of the detective work of that comes with just before the NMT, the neuromodulation. So the neuromodulation is actually, let's just take an allergy. Let's take an autoimmunity. Let's say there's autoimmunity to the gut, to the small intestine, and someone's having irritable bowel or whatever. Maybe that would be the colon, not the small intestine. And then it's red and inflamed. And what if we could ask the body, hey, where's this happening? What's happening? How many different immune cells are involved? What kinds of immune cells are involved? Are they antibody producing cells like B cells, or are they, just cells in the gut lining? And what signal is that giving to the brain? And what signal is the brain giving back down there? And if we can look at all that different information and say, well, you're doing this one set of things. Would you like to do this other set of things? Because that's more healthy. And then you're not creating this pain and inflammation. And the body's like, yeah, of course I want to do that. And so literally you give the body an instruction. It's a little bit like neurofeedback. And if people understand neurofeedback, it's where the brain feeds to a machine, an EEG, I think, this is what I look like. And then the EEG feeds back, this is what you're doing. Do you want to keep doing that? That's my simplistic understanding of neurofeedback. I'm not sure if that's exactly everything, but that's what the neuromodulation is. Hey, you're doing this. Hey, you're doing this thing. Do you want to do this thing? Let's do it. And it can be as simple as one teaching, or it can be you need several, because there's more layers. There's maybe some emotional stuff involved. Maybe there's some other tangential stuff involved. You just keep investigating and investigating. And what I find is that stuff stops. The pain stops. The inflammation stops. People start functioning better. They don't hurt anymore. Those kinds of things.
So that's really a great explanation. I feel like I'm right in there and I'm following what you're doing. And so my next question then, and maybe this is what you were getting to, is like, how does that work? So, because you mentioned at a distance with this one person with the neck pain. So I know in our pre-chat you had mentioned a bit about using muscle testing as an analysis, but I honestly don't know. So I'd love to hear, like, so once you know that the cell is doing this thing and you want it to, and you suggest this, how do you suggest it to, like, how do you give it that suggestion?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, to find out what the body's actually doing, I use a process called muscle response testing, or some people know it as applied kinesiology. And if you were in my office and I were touching you and testing a muscle, I'm going to move back a little bit. So you would hold your arm out straight and you would give me resistance. And if you want, the way I set it up, if I'm asking the question and the answer is yes, you go weak. Okay. Otherwise, if the question, so is there inflammation in the colon? If it's no, you're going to say strong. But if it's yes, you're going to go weak. And then we can ask about degrees of that just by asking more yes/no questions. So that's basically how I'm asking people's bodies the questions. It's basically my mind communicating almost in picture form to their subconscious mind, because their subconscious mind pretty much remembers everything that's ever happened. There's these files back there, and the muscle is what is sort of connected to that subconscious mind. And you can do this for supplement testing as well, right? You can hold the supplement. I have a bottle here. You can hold the supplement in the arm, in the person can hold it, and you can test them. Oh, if that's weak, then that's not a good one for you right now. If it's strong, okay, how many, and then you could take out the number of tablets and test what's the best dosage. One, they're strong. 2, they're strong. 3, they're weak. Okay, 2 is your best dosage. So that's kind of how you would do that. When I'm at a distance, that person's not in front of me, but you can use a surrogate to stand in for them. So it's someone who stands in, and I usually take a swab of their inner gum or cheek, so that I have some of their cells, and those cells, no matter how distant they are still connected and in communication with them. And there's a lot of information on this. These are concepts in quantum physics that we're not, there's no separation. And so I use their swab. This is what Dr. Klinghardt teaches in his autonomic response testing, that it has to do with light resonance of cells of the bodies and kind of complicated things I don't want to get into. So I will use a surrogate to do the muscle testing, and then I'll still get accurate answers. And I've been doing it since 2006. So I'm really confident. And I went through my years of not being confident in the answers. And now I just see the correlations. And so it works.
So is the surrogate in the room with you, or they're in the room with the other person? They're in the room with you and you're testing?
They're in the room with me because I need to test the muscle.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So then you just discover through this process what the sort of application will be to help them balance whatever's going on. I mean, you mentioned supplements. Sometimes is it some sort of supplement they start taking or that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a great word, discover. It's all about discovery. So thank you for putting that out there. It's about discovery. So we're discovering what's happening in the body. And then the instruction that's given is, let's say we find all these different immune cells attacking the colon. We want to either eliminate those ones that are attacking or sort of reprogram them and tell them, well, that's the body. You don't really want to attack that. So the way the neuromodulation protocol is set up, it's a very explicit verbal instruction to the body that's transmitted. Again, it's basically a therapeutic intention, but it's transmitted to the subconscious mind of the person, whether they're in the room or whether they're at a distance. And so that's, it's a little bit like I have a picture of what I want those cells to do. I have the very specific languaging, and then I'm transmitting that to the person, and they pick it up.
Cool.
Yeah, I just want to give an example of why that works. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to a book written by Dean Radin. He's studied a lot of consciousness type stuff. In it, it's called Entangled Minds, so anyone can get it off Amazon or wherever. And what Dean Radin did, or the experimenters did, was took two people who didn't know each other. They had them meditate for 15 minutes, and then they isolated them in separate rooms and put brainwave measuring equipment on them. And one person in one room was shown a strobe light. So they had a particular brain pattern that came out. And the other person was not shown that, but they were picking up on the brain pattern of the other person, which is very different than just sitting there calmly. And that's a piece of it. That's just the dramatic part of it, to show how we can entangle with others. So those are, that's even a factor I need to check when I'm at a distance with somebody. Are we entangled enough for me to get accurate answers? So there's all kinds of little ways to make sure I'm getting a good reading and that they're present with me, at least subconsciously, and all of that.
Cool. So, yeah, I heard about a study with goldfish related to that. I don't know if they were goldfish, but fish. They were testing the temporality of it, I guess, if that's the right word. Not to get too deep into that, but they were finding actually that the fish learned what the other fish knew, but it didn't matter in time. They could be connected, and then the one group could learn the new thing and the other group would have learned it. Anyway, it was cool just to see all of the ways that things interact with us, with our nervous system, with our consciousness, that are sort of beyond our normal daily experience, and then that's cool also that that there's this healing modality that takes advantage of that, that reality, and uses it to help people really heal what's going on with them.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say that it's very much based on the rules of quantum physics, which are non-locality. Gosh, I'm even forgetting them. The power of observation, right? If the observer's not there, something might not happen. But when we observe, it changes the event. And when I did the neuromodulation training, basically the first thing we do is have a 2-hour lecture on quantum physics and the nature of reality, and how we live in a physical 3-dimensional world, but there's a whole lot more going on that we don't necessarily see. So I think that it might sound a little far-fetched or out there, but it's actually, if you study quantum physics, not everyone wants to do that, you'll find a lot more going on.
Right. Yeah, we live in a time where the most cutting edge scientific stuff actually can sound the most sort of out there also at the same time, even though they're really based on the same thing. I mean, not the same thing, based on good, sound science and where people are going. So let's bring it, if you wouldn't mind, more specifically to the autism, the spectrum, ADHD. Like you mentioned that you kind of maybe didn't set out to find the results there, but like in your story, you mentioned with the child with the allergies that you started to see these other improvements. And also you may mention of, you kind of created a protocol or I don't know if that was your word, but, some sort of combination of things that you found have really been helping. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. What I find with kids on the spectrum or with neurodevelopmental issues is that they tend to be, I touched on the toxicity that we swim in every day. They tend to be some of the more toxic people on the planet. And I think part of the reason is because they don't have really good detoxification systems. I don't know if you've ever had anyone on the show who has talked about the MTHFR mutations, methylation. So yeah, methylation is a chemical reaction that happens in the body that's very, very important to use vitamins, to detoxify, to do a lot of cellular processes. And if we're not, picture a well-oiled machine, a factory, an assembly line where you're making a lot of things. And if one of those things, you don't have the raw ingredient or that machine isn't working, everything's going to get backed up and you're not going to get the end product. And so it's kind of like that in the cells. And so unfortunately, a lot of the kids who are on the spectrum have that messed up factory system because of the toxins. And so they can't get rid of the toxins. And so there's a few key things that I found that are really important to help kids to open that, to start that factory moving again. Even if you have genetic mutations, it's not a lost cause. So one of the biggest things that I don't think a lot of even naturopathic doctors or other doctors think about, and I don't know where you are in this, is we have certain systems that eliminate toxins from our body. This is the respiratory tract, right? We breathe out toxins. So if you smell someone with bad breath, there's probably a lot of toxins, or maybe they ate a lot of spices, or they have some bad flora, that are producing toxins. Our urinary tract, where we urinate, and our kidneys, and that filters out a lot of toxins, particularly heavy metals. The digestive tract, so if your kid's constipated or having diarrhea, well, if there's diarrhea, they're not absorbing food. But constipation, when that fecal matter sits in the colon for more than its, 12 to 24 hour time frame that it should be there, one of the things that happens in the colon is that we reabsorb water back into our system, right? That's why the poop is so, the consistency that it is. If we didn't reabsorb the water, we kind of have diarrhea all the time. So we bring back the water into the body, but that can also bring back toxins. So one of the key things to not reabsorb those toxins is to have what we call binders, just kind of like, supplements that can be, they're not sponges, but the function is they sponge up those toxins so it all goes out when they have a bowel movement. But if someone's chronically constipated and they've really got like a lot of compaction in there, that stuff it doesn't help them. It usually creates a lot of anger and tantrums. And you find that when they start going to the bathroom regularly, that anger level just comes way down. So that's another elimination route. And the skin, of course, is a big detox organ. Now within the body, one of the biggest detox organ or detox systems is our lymphatic system. So I'm just going to give a little picture here. If you have a little cell that's doing the things a cell does to provide you energy and to build proteins and build your muscles and those kinds of things, and then your cell kind of poops its toxins out, right? And it goes into the space between the cells. It's called the extracellular matrix. And this is kind of our structure, our connective tissue. It's the things that holds the bone and the skin and muscles together. If that area is clogged because it's not moving, and it should be moving into our lymph. It's like the sewer of the body. So picture a hair clog in your drain, and what happens? Everything backs up. So we kind of have these cells backed up and this extracellular matrix backed up and our lymph not really moving. Well, why is that? Well, we have a lot of chronic infections in there. So these are important to get these things moving. So that's a key. And so those are some of the assessments I do. It's not really a protocol, but I've just said what's important to look at here. And so I assess those detox functions. I also assess detox functions that happen inside the cells, so at the biochemical level. And then we have to assess the gut. I mentioned those microvilli. Are those even working? Are we even absorbing our nutrients? When we're all backed up, like I just described, it's really hard to take in new nutrients. So picture if you didn't take your garbage out of your house for a year, what would it look like? Would you be able to bring in something and actually get it to the refrigerator and put it in there before it's spoiled, So this is kind of the state of the body. I know it sounds dramatic, but but this is what I see. So we got to measure these things. And then we measure neurological function. We measure immune function. We measure allergies. We measure autoimmunity. So you can see it's not just one thing that's going on in the body. It's really a combination of a lot of systems. So if we take that holistic approach where we're looking at all that, then we can start making changes and start moving things. And it doesn't all happen at once. If you had your garbage in your house for a year, could you get it all out in an hour? No.
Right.
So that's kind of the process in big picture.
Gotcha. And so do you, for all that analysis or measurement and testing, is that like blood tests as far as what you do, or is that done using the neuromodulation technique, or how do you do all that?
Yeah, I don't do any blood I don't draw blood. I could do hair analysis sometimes, but usually people come to me and they've already had certain tests done. So I'll definitely look at those. But no, it's all muscle testing. What I'm doing is in the muscle testing, you're asking the subconscious, what do you perceive is going on? So I feel like that's an accurate in the moment answer versus a blood test you had 3 weeks ago that may not even, and the blood is only testing what's circulating.
Right.
It's not testing what's deep in the tissue. Like if you've got lead in your bones, which is a great, lead likes to store in the bones, you're never going to see that on a test.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes total sense to me. There's a lot of stuff that seems to get missed in our need for this, numbers on paper, type of analysis in our culture. So a bit, and then of course, obviously the sort of the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, if assessing these in this manner is creating results, that's the important part, obviously, aside from,
Absolutely. Well, it's creating information to give the instruction to get the results. And
right.
so, on my website, which is autismtransformed.com, I have a whole section on results, and these are like almost direct quotes from parents of what's happened after we've worked together. So people can go look at those.
Yeah. Yeah. Tremendous stuff there. I had a chance to take a look at that. So that's really cool. Yeah, well, so I mean, I think we're coming up on the end of our time soon. So I would just love to make sure before we do that you mentioned your website. Could you give us that web address again?
Yes, it's autismtransformed.com with a transform ed.
Okay, and we'll put that in the show notes also on the Kids Eating Broccoli website. And you had mentioned, let's see, you had a free download. Is it on that site there? Would they find it?
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to mention. One is I do have a free download, and this is for, you can help with autism and those the spectrum disorders with a lot of food, a lot of nutrition, a lot of supplements, but there's also actions you can take. And so the download on my website is 10 free actions you can do to help your child. And I'll just give one of them is a neck lymph massage. So a lot of times I talked about that congestion and we're not draining. If you can just massage the lymph nodes here and then open the lymph channels. And that's good to do before your child goes to bed, or on yourself before you go to bed, because that'll help drain all that stuff as your body's sleeping. So that's just one of those 10 things. So that's the download. The other thing I wanted to mention is I'm putting together, it's almost ready, a muscle testing course. And this is for parents that will help determine what are the supplements to give to their kids. Now, a lot of parents that I work with, they might have 20, 30, 40 different supplements that many doctors have given them over time, right? And I actually had a mom who her doctor gave her like 20 different supplements. She was giving her son 20 supplements a day. He was 3 years old. And when she learned to muscle test, what she found out, asking her son's body, do you need this today? Yes or no? Do you need this today? Yes or no? How much? 1, 2, 3, whatever. And what she found out is that he only needed 2 to 3 supplements every day. And they changed and they rotated depending on where his body was and what was going on. And so she was so grateful. This was the power of knowing this information, that she could have make better choices for her son. And then he was just way calmer and not as agitated because there was just too much going in the body that didn't need to go in. So my goal in June is to release this. It's going to be an online video course then with live practice sessions, because the biggest part, I think, for us to learn muscle testing is to trust ourselves on the answer. So that's what that live, you can ask questions and we'll practice together and I'll give pointers and stuff like that. So that'll be coming out in June.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great resource. I mean, I think of, a number of things. I mean, yeah, I run into parents that have this laundry list, of supplements, and you start asking, well, why these ones, because there's 7,000 they could be giving them. And it's like, well, this doctor told me these 5 and my chiropractor said these 10. And it's like, well, some of these are, and there's no coordinated method. And then even if it comes from one practitioner, like you mentioned, with the best intentions, it makes a lot of sense that there would be shifting needs related to those things, and that they would be, some are just temporary. And so they give it to you and you're still giving it to your kid 2 years later, but they were done with their need for it after 3 months. And it's like, now you're taxing the system. So that's really cool. Yeah. I don't do muscle testing specifically in my practice. I use a different form of analysis, but there's a overlap, I think, in that, where when you're new, it's like, is this really right? Because we do different things with leg length testing and so forth. And So yeah, self-confidence in it is a great one. So that's a wonderful resource. Most certainly, I'll mention, I asked a question, my co-admin, a Facebook group that we have about 7,000 members. It's natural drug-free ADHD and autism group. And I just asked a question the other day, what's your number one challenge / difficulty in taking this, drug-free natural route? And well, number one was money, but number two was supplements, and it's like, I don't know which supplements to give, because it seems like every week, every month, whatever it is, there's a new super supplement, super group of supplements, wonder super, food and so forth. It's like, let's try the next one. Let's try the next one. And so to have some resource that you can use at home yourself, that's a powerful thing to be offering people. So
Absolutely.
that's a great thing.
I'll tell you one very quick story. When I was learning muscle testing and I was learning to do it on myself, I was using this finger as the resistor and this finger as the one to push down. And my son, who was 7 at the time, he came in and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm learning muscle testing." I explained it to him. You can get yes, no answers. And 5 minutes later, I kid you not, he's like, "Oh, okay, I got it." And later on, he came to me in the day and he goes, "Mama, I know everything." And and he had no confidence problem in trusting his result. It's when we doubt ourselves, and so that's the hump I feel like people need to get over. So that's going to be the juicy part.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, what you're showing there, right? I mean, how hard is that mechanically? That's easy, right? I just did it. But to know, to be able to trust the interpretation and all of those things, obviously, is the challenge. So that's cool. Yeah, I'll have to look that up for sure. Well, cool. So I appreciate you taking your time. Any last thoughts or anything you want to share before we close for today?
I'll just mention one more thing because it popped into my head. I do have individual clients that I work with. So we do all that big assessment I talked about and then individual sessions. But what I started doing last year was group sessions. And I actually started doing this back in 2006, 2007, when I first learned neuromodulation. I just didn't do it with an autism population. I did it with just population at large. And what we do is currently gather together on Zoom for a group. And these are all kids somewhere on the spectrum. And what we're really looking at is those things internally: the toxicity, the drainage, the detox organs, the immune system, the neurological system. Because after we go through all those things, you still have to repair you still have to get the nerves to talk to each other. And that's been incredibly successful, because the power of a group, let's say we have 20 people in a group, that's greater than 20 people's kind of energy and effort. It's really magnified. So that's been really amazing. I've been a little bit surprised, but not, because the kids are there's really been some good results. A lot of them are sleep, anger issues, constipation, those kind of baseline things, because that's what we worked on. And we see kids starting to get better with social things, attention, focus, anxiety goes way down. So I see those in groups as well. And I just wanted to mention that, because who would think to do all this stuff in a group? Well, I would, but it's out there, it's available. So if people are interested in that, you can just go to my website and fill out a contact form, ask questions about it. I have information on there, just root around there.
Awesome. Well, glad you mentioned that too.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much again for being part of this. Definitely a lot of great insight and information to be sharing with everybody today. So I like I said, I appreciate you taking your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast. Wasn't that fascinating information about how we can use the body's own wisdom to learn more about what's going on inside, so we can help the child from the inside out? If you enjoy this, please go on over to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to your podcasts, or all of them for that matter. Leave a rating, a review, and like it and share it, because those ratings and reviews really help other parents and families who are looking for this information find it effectively. So you can do your part to help make the next generation the best generation. I wanted to tell you 2 quick things here too. One is this episode is brought to you by HempWorks CBD oil. HempWorks is a company I partner with because they meet my top 3 criteria. The hemp that is the CBD oil is extracted from is organically grown in the US. It's extracted using the chemical-free CO2 extraction process, and every batch is third-party tested, so you know what you're getting, how much you're getting. You can check out more or purchase some at the link, which is drellisorcbd.com. That's drellisorcbd.com. And I also wanted to mention that for a limited time, so depending on when you're listening to this podcast episode, I've severely marked down my 21-day ADHD Freedom Nutrition program. It's one of my premier go at your own pace self-study programs, helping parents learn how to feed their kids in a healthy way to help them have the best chance to reach their full potential, resolve health conditions, and set them up for a future of good health. And I'll put the link for that in the show notes. But typically, well, the full retail price of that is $300. Often I'll sell it for as low as $147, but for a limited time, I've dropped it down to $27. You might ask, why in the world would you sell it for about 10% of the normal going price? The reason is because a little while ago, I did a survey of about 7,000 parents in the natural medication-free ADHD autism space and asked what the biggest challenges and difficulties they had in going the natural drug-free route. And the overwhelming number one answer was money, or the cost of everything. So it really struck me that if I want to make a difference and I want to reach as many families as I do, as I say I do, I need to do something a little different, maybe drastically different. So I dropped the price of that program down to $27. So go to kidseatingbroccoli.com, find this episode, go to the show notes, click the link, go there, get the program, get going, get your kids healthier. All right. Until next time, we'll see ya.